Flying, a popular method of mass transport used by people of all walks of life. Whilst air travel was originally considered luxurious, and in some cases still is, increasingly accessible airfares are meaning that the majority of the time it can be incredibly unpleasant, especially for those in economy. Today I'm going on holiday and ahead of me lies an almost 11-hour flight, and I wondered if there are any ways that I can make my flight more comfortable according to science. Oh, and I'll be looking at the ways to reduce the impact of jet lag on my trip. So, let's get to the airport. Today I'm flying from London Heathrow, Europe's busiest airport, serving about 230,000 passengers per day. My destination today is Las Vegas, and I'll be travelling in economy class. Prior to this video, I've been slowly adjusting my body to the time zone of Las Vegas to reduce the effects of jet lag. This is a good way of doing this, however I do realise that not everyone will be able to do this, as it can be quite disruptive to the day. With that being said, once you are on the plane, I would recommend trying to adjust then, as even this is something. I did this on my way home, as I was simply too preoccupied to do this before. So, here is a list of things to do in anticipation of your flight to make the journey more comfortable. 1. Choose your outfit carefully. Honestly, this is the best way to get comfortable, even on the ground, and so the importance of this is absolutely paramount in a situation as potentially uncomfortable as air travel. For instance, I always find jeans so uncomfortable, so I know to avoid them, and I tend to go for something more comfortable, like chinos, for instance. It is very, very much a personal preference, but anything flexible is definitely for the win. It's also worth keeping in mind hygiene. Plane seats are not going to be that clean, and so reducing the amount of contact your skin has with the seats can be beneficial in terms of preventing infection. In terms of the rest of your outfit, comfort is still important, as is warmth, because the drastic change in altitude also causes changes in temperature, and this is why planes can be so cold. A jacket may be a good idea, as this can be easily removed or put back on depending on the temperature. And last but not least, footwear is incredibly important, as walking or running, depending on your timekeeping skills, is inevitable when travelling. And to prevent blistering, it is vital that you wear a suitable pair. I went for my go-to Converse, but any trainer or worn shoes should be fine. I would avoid new Doc Martens. 2. Pack wisely. I am a chronic overpacker, mostly because I worry that I'll need something random, a highlighter or something trivial, and not have it. As much as it is very hypocritical for me to suggest this, as I do not follow my own advice in this matter, do not overpack, because your back will make you pay. I suppose I am the sort of person to tell you this, because this has happened to me countless times. Only pack essentials like chargers, a pillow, water, and any medication you may need, and perhaps some spare clothes in case your luggage ends up on its own holiday, as almost happened on this trip. I would also suggest bringing something to entertain yourself, like an iPad, which I brought, and or a book. I also brought a book. I took Solaris by Stanislaw Lem, which kept me entertained for quite a while. Other essentials, in my opinion at least, include eye masks, which are vital for sleeping and generally blanking out your surroundings and relaxing, earplugs, especially if you are unfortunate enough to be sat next to a toddler, noise-cancelling headphones for similar reasons, and face wash and a toothbrush, obviously with toothpaste, to maintain your personal hygiene whilst in the air. This is also a good way of maintaining a routine even whilst travelling. Snacks are also a good thing to pack, as they can be quite comforting and relaxing. 3. Choosing the right seat. A seat can make or break your flight, and depending on what you want to get out of your flight, you may feel that a specific seat is more preferential. There are so many factors to consider: window versus aisle, front, middle or back row, economy or business, etc. Many of these decisions are based on sheer preference. However, there is some science to the perfect seat. Let's start with a big factor: safety. There is a common misconception following some high-profile plane crashes, like the recent and tragic Air India crash in June of 2025, that air travel is less safe than it used to be. But this is simply not true statistically. It is reported that air travel has become as much as twice safer in each of the last 5 decades, meaning that it is the reverse of what some may think. It is inherently safe. In fact, the rate of incidents in air travel is less than car travel. But because of how rare these accidents are, they're reported on more, making the public more nervous about flying. The Air India crash, while still being not fully understood, followed extenuating circumstances that are extremely unlikely to be replicated again, and that is part of why the mass loss of life is so devastating. I would now like to send my sincerest condolences to the victims and the families and the friends of the victims of the tragic accident before I move on to the sole survivor. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, I really hope I pronounced that correctly, who was seated in row 11, seat A. So, is seat 11A any safer than, for example, 12A? Well, this is very hard to say. Kumar was seated in an emergency exit row adjacent to a door, meaning that he was lucky enough to have an escape. Additionally, he was on the side of the plane that hung from the building rather than the side that collided directly with it. This accumulation of luck is unlikely to happen more than once, and so the chance that seat 11A is the safest on the plane is minimal, because seat arrangements vary from aircraft to aircraft and airline to airline. Overall, though, exit row seats are almost always the safest on a plane as they allow for ease of evacuation. Seats towards the back of the plane have as much as a 20% greater chance of survival in the case of a crash than those in, for instance, the front of the cabin. So for those like me in economy, you actually have a higher chance of survival than those in business. So there are 2 main reasons for this. 1, the front is generally the point of impact in most accidents, and therefore the back receives less of the force and impact, making the people more likely to survive and with fewer injuries also. 2, the back of the plane is most likely to stay fully intact following a crash, or if it were to be separated, also stay fully intact, because the kinetic energy as a result of the impact would be less towards the back, meaning that the body of the plane would survive for the most part anyway. Now, these are the main points to cover in terms of safety, so let's talk about comfort for a moment. Whilst the back of the cabin assures some level of safety statistically, it is also the noisiest part of the plane, especially those behind the engines, as these are rather loud due to the exhaust. Being near the galley can also be rather noisy, as this is where the crew work and also take breaks, meaning that talking is somewhat expected. Additionally, the back part of the cabin is most susceptible to turbulence, and for those who get nauseous, it may be wise to avoid these seats. This is due to the proximity to the tail, which is gauged by the wind and causes bumps and turbulence. For those concerned about turbulence, sitting over the wing may be preferable, as this is near the centre of gravity, making sudden movements less dramatic. So, how about the positions of these seats within these rows? Well, the window seat is actually shown to decrease the risk of contracting a disease. This is because the window seat is most isolated from others, and by not moving from this area, you're effectively reducing your risk of contracting any diseases. The aisle is the worst for this, however, but it is better in the sense that you are more free to move than those in the middle or window seat. Whilst many people avoid the middle seat, these are often the widest seats available on the plane, at least in economy. Obviously, it can be awkward to be sat between 2 strangers, but if you can't avoid it, then I've given you a positive spin, I suppose. So, let's move on to arguably the most important section. These are the things that you should do when you have boarded the aircraft. Okay, so much of the things you should or shouldn't do on the ground still apply. Personal hygiene is a great example. Remember to sanitize your hands regularly, and also consider cleaning the table with a wet wipe or something similar to reduce your risk of disease. Drinking a good amount of water and brushing your teeth are also good habits to maintain. Now, something that you probably shouldn't do, that you may do on the ground, and I do see the irony of me saying this as I fly to Las Vegas, also known as Sin City, is drinking alcohol. This is for good reason though. A recent study found that drinking alcohol and then sleeping can cause significant heart problems as a result of lower air pressure than we are used to on the ground, which is especially problematic for those with pre-existing heart problems. The specific issue is that the saturation of oxygen within the drinker's body decreases, which is rather obviously an issue. Another thing to consider, also related to the heart, is blood circulation. And one thing that is really bad for this is crossing your legs. Not only will this cause pain and discomfort over time, but this can also restrict blood flow to the extremities, causing stiffness and, in extremely severe cases, deep vein thrombosis. This is especially true for older passengers. Compression socks and regular movements are great for regulating blood flow, and you should do this regularly throughout the flight. Moving on from general habits to a more specific topic, let's talk about jet lag. I briefly mentioned this at the beginning and how I roughly adjusted to the time zone before boarding. However, there is a lot more that you can do once you board to reduce its effects. Research by Northwestern University suggests that food scheduling, where meals are correlated to match the new time zone, is a great method of combating jet lag. This resets the so-called body clock. Airlines like Qantas that run particularly long international routes already utilise these schedules, whilst British Airways, who I am flying with today, do not have such a system. Certain foods, like those relatively high in protein, are good to eat, and those containing high levels of saturated fats are to be avoided, just like in usual day-to-day nutrition. Oh, and once you land, you should consider going for a hearty breakfast in alignment with the time zone. All of this is shown to reduce the average of 1 day per time zone as a recovery period by as much as a third. So an obvious thing to do, at least on flights where you'd be sleeping if already in your destination, is just that, sleep. The things you should have packed earlier, the eye mask, pillow, earplugs, etc., will aid you in a more comfortable sleep. Additionally, to protect your ears, it is always good to wear earplugs, specifically filtered earplugs, to protect them from the rapid air pressure changes induced by flying. Nasal sprays and chewing things are also recommended for coping with air pressure. Now, these are the main things, but it is also important to relax, as stress can really affect every aspect of your life and even exacerbate symptoms of jet lag, which is a disruption to the circadian rhythm and largely controlled by hormones. Okay, and once you've landed, ensure that you expose yourself to natural bright lights, obviously whilst wearing sun protection. This will help to reduce jet lag. Oh, and this last tip is extremely important. Have a great holiday or vacation, whatever you want to call it. Thanks so much for watching this video. This is the first installment of my new series, so if you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a like and also subscribing to my channel, because I make videos like this every month. Goodbye.